we're going to be looking at the upcoming feast of weeks, the feast of weeks according to Leviticus 23, which is also the feast of first fruit. They are together. This one starts and end at this one, so they are kind of connected. Those two feasts are connected. So we've already looked at the main information, main scriptures, and we to see when we're supposed to keep that feast, which is in the middle of the third month. In the middle of the third month, the feast of weeks or the feast of first fruit, whatever you call it, the feast of weeks. Sister, could you do me a favor and mute your mic, please? So the feast of weeks and the feast of first fruit is to be celebrated in the middle of the third month. So we have already looked at the scriptures that shows that we're supposed to keep that feast in the middle of the third month. Leviticus chapter 23 say that when we are in the land, when we come into the land, speak to the children of Israel and say to them, when you come into the land which I give to you and reap its harvest, then you shall bring a sheaf of the first fruit of your harvest to the priest. So this Leviticus 23 is when we are in the land. According to Jubilees chapter 6, when we are not in the land, when we are out of the land, we keep it in the middle of the third month. We're supposed to keep the feast of first fruit or the feast of weeks in the middle of the third month. This is what we saw today in the book of Jubilees. Jubilees chapter 6. Jubilees chapter 6. We saw that very, 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 very clearly. To keep this feast, the feast of weeks or the feast of first fruit. It says in Jubilees chapter 6 from verse 17. Jubilees 6 from verse 17. Jubilees chapter 6 from verse 17. For this reason it is ordained and written on the heavenly tablet that they should celebrate the feast of weeks in this month once a year, to renew the covenant every year. And this festival was celebrated in heaven from the day of creation till the days of Noah, 26 jubilees and 5 weeks of years. So the Most High, this feast was celebrated in heaven, and then Noah also celebrated it. And then after Noah, Abraham also celebrated it, as you can see from verse 19, Jubilees chapter 6 from verse 19. But Abraham observed it, and Isaac, his chick, and Jacob and his children observe it up to your days. And in your days, the children of Israel forgot it until you celebrated it anew on this mountain. Verse 20, Jubilees 6:20. Jubilees chapter 6 verse 20. I am reading this because this place in the book of Jubilees chapter 6 shows us that when we are not in the land of Israel, we are supposed to keep that feast in the middle of the third month. In the middle of the third month. You keep it the way you see in Leviticus 23 when you are in the land of Israel. When you are in the land of Israel, then you keep it the way you see in Leviticus 23. Continuing from verse 20, and do you command the children of Israel to observe this festival in all their generations for a commandment unto them, one day in the year, in this month, they shall celebrate the festival. Verse 21, for it is the feast of weeks and the feast of first fruit. This feast is twofold and of a double nature, according to what is written and engraved concerning it, celebrate it. So we are to keep this feast the same day, the same time that Abraham celebrated it. And we see that according to Jubilees chapter 15, Abraham kept this feast in the middle of the third month. Abraham kept it in the middle of the third month, according to Jubilees chapter 15. And in the 5th year of the 4th week of this Jubilee, in the 3rd month, in the middle of the month, Abraham celebrated the feast of first fruit of the grain harvest. Abram celebrated the feast of the first fruit of the grain harvest. When did he celebrate it? In the middle of the month. In the 3rd month. In the 3rd month. In the 3rd month. in the third month, in the middle of the month, Abraham celebrated it. Noah also celebrated it in the middle of the third month. Noah also celebrated it in the middle of the third month, as you can see here in Jubilees chapter 6 from verse 1. Jubilees chapter 6 from verse 1. And on the new moon of the third month, he went forth from the ark and built an altar on that mountain. So in the third month, that's when he came out of the ark. He built an altar and made an offering, made a sacrifice to the Most High. Moshe himself, Moses also celebrated this Feast of Weeks in the middle of the third month, as we see here in Jubilees chapter 1. Jubilees chapter 1. And it came to pass in the first year of the exodus of the children of Israel out of Egypt, in the third month, on the 16th day of the month, the third month, on the 16th day of the month, 16th day, that's around the middle of the month. So Moshe kept the feast in the middle of the third month. It's in the 16th of the month. Abraham, according to Jubilees chapter 15, kept the feast in the middle of the month. Noah also came out of the ark on the third month. So we can clearly see that we are to keep this feast in the middle of the third month. So when you look at the book of Jubilees chapter 6, this is the information that I need to add. I need to point this out. I have to point this out because if you look at Jubilees chapter 6 right here, it says in Jubilees chapter 6:19, but Abraham observed it. His chick, that is Isaac, his chick and Jacob and his children observed it up to your days. And in your days, the children of Israel forgot it until you celebrated it anew on this mountain. So Jubilees chapter 6:19 is saying that Abraham observed it. We already saw in Jubilees chapter 15. We saw that in Jubilees chapter 15 that Abraham observed it in the middle of the third month. Abraham observed this feast in the middle of the third month. But I want to show you about Isaac. I want to show you also when Isaac observed it, because we do have scripture that shows when Isaac, the children of Abraham, observed it, and that will be Jubilees chapter 22. So I'm going to show you two things in this particular basically this particular scripture, this situation here. So Jubilees chapter 22, which I recommend that you read if you're interested in observing the Feast of Weeks. If you're interested in observing this feast, I recommend that you read Jubilees chapter 22, because you will see how they observed it. You will actually see how it was observed, because we need to also look at how do you observe this feast? How is this feast observed? So let's read Jubilees chapter 22, and then later on I'm going to show you how Jacob observed it. So this is a feast that our ancestors took very seriously. Our ancestors took this feast seriously, just like it says in Jubilees chapter 6 verse 19, that our ancestors observed it. So if we look at Jubilees chapter 22, from verse 1, it shows us how Isaac and Ishmael, it says here, Isaac, that is Yitzchak, and Ishmael came to celebrate the Feast of Weeks before Abraham's death. So Jubilees 22 from verse 1, and it came to pass in the first week, in the fourth Jubilee, in the second year, that is the year in which Abraham died, that Yitzchak, that is Isaac, and Ishmael came from the wall of the oath to celebrate the Feast of Weeks, that is the feast of first fruit of the harvest, to Abraham, their father. And Abraham rejoiced before his two sons had come. Verse 2, for Isaac, that is Yitzchak, for Isaac had many possessions in Bathsheba, and Yitzchak and Isaac was wont to go and see his possessions and return to his father. Verse 3, and in those days Ishmael came to see his father, that is Abraham, and they both came together. So Isaac and Ishmael came together, and Isaac offered a sacrifice for a burnt offering and presented it on the altar of his father, which he had made in Hebron. And he offered a ta- offered a thank offering and made a feast. He made a feast of joy before Ishmael, his brother. And Rebekah made a new cake, made a new cake from the new grain. This is very significant information. Please pay attention to the part that said that Rebekah made new cakes from the new grain. Rebekah made new cakes from the new grain and gave them to Isaac, and gave them to Isaac, or gave them to Jacob, sorry, and gave them to Jacob, her son, to take them to Abraham, his father, from the first fruits of the land, that he might eat and bless the Creator of all things before he died. So here you see how they celebrated the Feast of Weeks, how they celebrated it. They took some grain, they took some of the new harvest, as it says here about Rebecca. So they took from the new grain, and she made a cake. This is significant for anyone who is wondering, how do I celebrate this feast? So they actually grew their own food. These people actually cultivated and harvested their crops. And she made a cake. She made cakes from the new grain. So, of course, if you are in a place where you are not growing your own food, if you're not growing your own food, you don't have any farm and things like that, I will show you another way to do it. So we see that Jacob, if we go back to Jubilees chapter 6, Jubilees chapter 6, it says, but Abraham observed it. We already saw in Jubilees chapter 15, Jubilees chapter 15 from verse 1, that Abraham observed it. And then it says, and Isaac and Jacob and his children observed it. So what I just showed you here, right here in Jubilees 22, is when Isaac observed it. So Jubilees 22, Jubilees chapter 22 shows us that Isaac observed this feast, just like it says here in Jubilee, just like it says here in Jubilees chapter 6. So Isaac observed it. Jacob also observed it. So we see here that when Isaac observed it, his mother, basically, uh, when Isaac observed it, Rebecca made new cakes. Rebecca made new cakes, and he made new cakes from the new grain. New grain. So what does it have to do with you? What does this have to do with you? Because you may not be growing your own food where you are. So what do you do in that case if you're not growing your own food? So let's go to Jubilees chapter 44. Jubilees chapter 44. So now you see how Jacob observed this feast in Jubilees 44. Jubilees chapter 44 shows us how Jacob, Israel, how he observed this feast. And it's very significant, very, very important. So let's start from verse 1. Jubilees 44 from verse 1. It says, and Israel, that is Jacob, because this translation uses the real name of the Most High and the real name of the Israelite. So it says, and Israel took his journey from Haran, from his house on the new month, on the new month or new moon of the third month. You see that? Do you see that third month? So we see that Moses observed this feast on the third month. Abraham observed this feast in the middle of the third month. Noah observed this feast on the third month. So now we're seeing in Jubilees 44, the book of Jubilees chapter 44, we're seeing that Jacob also observed this feast on the third month. It said that Jacob, Israel, took his journey from Haran, from his house on the new month or the new moon on the new moon of the third month, and he went on the way of the wall of the oath, and he offered a sacrifice to Yahweh, the Almighty, of his father, Yitzchak, that is Isaac, on the 7th of this month. So on the 7th of the third month, he offered a sacrifice. So that's on a Sabbath day. On a Sabbath day, Isaac offered a sacrifice. So Isaac was pretty much, he basically observed the Sabbath. Remember that, oh my goodness, this is beautiful. This is amazing. This is amazing. I'm going to start using this thing to show that Jacob kept the Sabbath. Jacob kept the Sabbath. How do we know? Because he left his house. He left on the new moon, and he traveled on the new moon. He left on the new moon, and then he kept the Sabbath, basically, as you can see here. And he went on the way of the wall of the oath, and he offered a sacrifice to Yahweh, the Almighty, of his father, on the 7th of this month. So on the 7th. So you see that Isaac, or Jacob, Israel, kept the Sabbath on the 7th day of this month. He kept the Sabbath. He offered an offering. So offering an offering takes time. Isaac did not work on that day. In order to offer this offering, it takes time to prepare an offering. You're not going to do it like in 1 minute or like in 30 minutes. It doesn't take 30 minutes to kill an animal and offer an offering. So we can clearly see here in Jubilees 44 that Isaac kept the Sabbath 7 days from the new moon. Jacob, Israel kept the Sabbath 7 days from the new moon. I'm not making this up. It's right here in Jubilees 44. So let's keep going and get to the part that he kept the feast that we're looking at today. And Jacob remembered the dream that he had seen at Bethel, and he feared to go down into Egypt while he was thinking of sending word to Joseph to come to him, and that he will not go down. He remembered there. He remained there 7 days. He remained there 7 days. So he left his house on the new moon. On the 7th day, which is the Sabbath, he made an offering. He observed the Sabbath. And then he remained there another 7 days. He remained there 7 days. So now this brings him to the middle of the third month. Remember that he left on the third month, right here. On the third month, he left. On the new moon, new moon of the third month, he left. On the 7th day, 7 days from the new moon day, he observed the Sabbath. He rested and he offered an offering. As you can clearly see here, listen, my brothers and sisters, it does not take 1 hour to kill an animal and offer an offering. It takes time. So this man stayed in one place and basically praised Yah, offered an offering to Yah. And he remained in that place. He remained there for 7 days. If perchance he could see a vision to whether he should remain or go down to Egypt. Go down. Now look at this. And he celebrated the harvest festival of the first fruit with old grain. For in all the land of Canaan, there was not a handful of seed in the land, for the famine was over all the beasts and cattle and birds and all over men. So what I'm trying to show you here is that we see a very significant information in this Jubilees chapter 44. Jubilees 44 shows us that, first of all, this man left his house on the new moon, and on the 7th day, he offered an offering to Yah. On the 7th day, just like the Messiah commanded us to do to offer an offering on a Sabbath day. So on the 7th day, he offered an offering. On the 7th day, he offered an offering to Yah. He offered an offering to Yah on the 7th day. So he rested on the 7 days from the new moon. He left his house on the new moon. He left his house from the new moon on the new moon, and on the 7th day, 7 days after the new moon, he rested. He offered an offering to Yah. He offered an offering to Yah. You can clearly see it here, and it takes time to do that. So he wasn't on a journey, and at the same time offering an offering. He settled in one place on the 7th day and offered an offering. So he basically worshipped Yah on 7 days from the new moon day. So, and then we see that he he remained in that place 7 more days, bringing him to the middle of the 3rd month. He was traveling. He left his house on the new moon. He traveled and he rested on the 7th day, 7 days from the new moon day. He offered an offering. He offered an offering, and then he also remained in that place 7 more days. He remained there 7 days. So that brings him to the middle of the 3rd month. It was in that middle of the 3rd month that he was there. That was when he now celebrated the feast, in the middle of the 3rd month. So 7 days from the new moon day, he basically kept the Sabbath by offering that offering he offered to Yah. He stopped traveling. On the 7 days from the new moon day, he stopped traveling. He stopped traveling. On the 7th of this month, he offered an offering. He made an offering to Yah, and he offered a sacrifice to Yahweh, the Almighty of his father, on the 7th of this month. So he made an offering to Yah. He worshipped Yah on the 7th day. He worshipped Yah on the 7th day, and he remained there for 7 days. So that brings him to the middle of the 3rd month, to which he now offered. He celebrated harvest festival of the first fruit with old grain. Now this has to do with you, because you right now, maybe you don't grow your own food anymore, or maybe you live in a place where you don't have any land to grow food. Look at what Jacob did. Jacob was in a foreign land. He was traveling. He wasn't in his land. He was not in his land. He's in a different place, and he used old grain to celebrate this feast in the middle of the 3rd month. So, my brother, my sister, you don't have to worry that much. Just look for old grain. Look for old grain to use it to prepare something on that day. Prepare something before that day, something that you eat on that day. Prepare something that you eat on that day. You can go to the store and buy. Some people use corn. Some people use corn to do this. Corn. But I wouldn't advise you to do it in America. If you live in America, don't buy corn, because their corn is genetically modified. Most of the corn in America is genetically modified. I would have said go to the market and buy corn, and use that corn to, like, you can cook the corn and eat it on that day. But I wouldn't advise you to do that if you live in America, because their corn is genetically modified. So you can try to prepare something with go buy like some kind of vegetables and things like that. Vegetables and things, just like he used old grain. So he used old grain to prepare for that, to celebrate that harvest. Jubilees 44:4. Jubilees 44:4. And he celebrated the harvest festival of the first fruit with old grain. So he didn't use a new grain, because there was a famine. For in all the land of Canaan, there was not a handful of seed in the land, for the famine was over all the beasts and cattle and birds, and also over men. So there was famine in the land. Just like today, there's famine all over the land, because it's hard to find real food. It's hard to find real food that has not been tampered with chemicals. So you celebrate this feast. Let me tell you something, my brothers and sisters. The most important thing is for you not to go to work on that day. Keep this feast like a Sabbath. Keep it like a Sabbath. That's exactly what I'm going to do. Like it says in Leviticus 23. Leviticus 23, the Most High made it very clear, we are not to do any civil work on that day. So you are to keep it like a Sabbath day. Observe this feast like a Sabbath day. So prepare whatever you're going to eat on that day. Just buy some things from the store and prepare a very good meal. Prepare a very good meal that you're going to eat on that day. Try to add as much as, make it as natural as possible. As natural as possible. Cook something natural. Just like you see here in Jubilees chapter 22, that Rebecca baked cake. Rebecca baked baked cake with the new grain, because they had new grain. You may not have new grain because of you don't grow your own food anymore. You don't have any land. Then in that case, you do it. As you can see, Rebecca baked a cake from the new grain. You can make a cake if you can find a good grain, like something that is not genetically modified. So if you know how to make cake, if you know how to make cake, then go to the store, get a non-GMO flour, a non-GMO flour, and bake a cake. Just like Jacob, our father, the father of the Israelite, just like Jacob used old grain to celebrate this feast. Because remember that the main law in Leviticus 23 says that when you come into the land and grow your own food, when you come into the land and harvest your crop, then you are to observe this feast. But when you're not in the land, then you cannot do it the way you see in Leviticus 23, because that law in Leviticus 23 says when you are in the land, when you are in the land. So when you're not in the land, you're not going to be able to do it that way. So when you're not in the land, you will do what Jacob did here. Jacob was in Canaan. He was in the land of Canaan, and he used old grain. So you can go to the store, buy old, buy a non-GMO grain to bake a cake, or you just prepare something to eat on that day. If you're in Africa, you can look for a corn. Look for corn or something natural and prepare to eat on that day. Most important thing is to praise here on that day. Praise and worship the Most High. Give him glory. Acknowledge him and thank him for keeping you alive and giving you the opportunity to observe these laws and these feast days. Thank the Most High on that day. Worship him. Do not go to work on that day. Observe that day like a Sabbath day. Observe it like a Sabbath day, just like you see in Leviticus chapter 26. Very, very clear that we are not to do any civil work on that day forever and ever. So all praises to our Heavenly Father. This is what I wanted to point out to show you this two more scriptures. Jubilees 22 that shows how the children of Abraham observed it, just like he says right here in Jubilees chapter 6:15. But Abraham observed it, and Isaac and Jacob, his children, observed it. So that's why I came to Jubilees 22 to show you how they observed it. And also Jubilees 44. Jubilees 44, you see that Jacob also observed it in a foreign land, and he used old grain. So prepare some good meal on that day and praise Yah. Praise the Most High, give him glory, worship him on that day, and observe that day like a Sabbath day. So all praises to our Heavenly Father. Let's continue with the study. So what we're going to do right now, don't worry about what you see in Leviticus 23, because according to Leviticus 23 from verse 9, Leviticus 23 from verse 9, Leviticus 23 from verse 9 is when you are in the land of Israel. There's no date that was given to you. There is no date whatsoever. Every other feast has a date. This feast has no date. Every other one has a date. This one has no date. So if you're not in the land of Israel, then you have to keep it the way you see in Jubilees chapter 6. Jubilees chapter 6, it shows you that we're supposed to keep it in the middle of the third month. If you are in the land of Israel and you're growing your own food, then you have to do it this way. As you can see in verse 10, speak to the children of Israel and say to them, when you come into the land which I give to you and reap its harvest, then you shall bring a sheaf of the first fruit of your harvest to the priest, and he shall wave the sheaf before Yahweh to be accepted on your behalf. On the day after the Sabbath, the priest shall wave it. So that is if you are in the land. If you are not in the land, then don't do it this way. If you're not in the land of Israel, don't do it this way. When you're in the land of Israel, you do it this way. So if you're not in the land, we do it in the middle of the third month. So in this third month right now, when is the feast going to be? That is what we're going to find out. So let's look at the upcoming new moon for this year in 2023. We're going to look at this year, 2023. 2023. When is the feast going to be? That is what we're going to see right now. So let's look at this year. Let's go to moongiant.com. Right now, we're in the second month right now. We are in the second month at this point. So I'm right here in Moon Giant. I am right here in moongiant.com. Moongiant.com. Moon Giant. I am going to go to right here where it says monthly calendar, monthly moon calendar, and I will click on it. I'm just doing this to kind of give you an idea of when the feast of first fruit is going to be for this year, 2023. This information is only for this year, 2023. Okay, so if you're in 2024, if you're seeing this in 2024 or 2025, you're going to have to find out when the third month is going to be, and then the Sabbath in the middle of that third month is most likely going to be the feast. So I'm dealing with 2023 right now. As you can see, we are in the second month right now in the biblical calendar. So because the middle of the third month we're talking about here is the biblical calendar. The middle of the third month is not March. This feast has nothing to do with man-made calendar. This feast is based entirely on the biblical calendar. This one right here that the Most High created. So we're talking about the biblical calendar. The middle of third month we're talking about is not March. The third month we're talking about is not March. The third month we're talking about is 3 months after Passover. 3 months from Passover. Passover is usually in March or April. So the third month we're talking about has nothing to do with Passover. So right here, let me go to the for the new moon that will begin the third month. This, because we're in second month right now. So this is the new moon that will begin the third month. Next new moon is going to begin on May 19th. May 19th. The feast of first fruit is going to be in the middle of that month. In the middle of the third month. So what we're going to do is, let me count from here. So we're going to count this as 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. So what I want to do right now is to count how many days it's going to be in this particular month. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. Saturday, okay. 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30. 30. Okay, so there will be 30 days in that month. There will be 30 days. The next day, on Sunday, will be a new moon. Sunday will be a new moon. There's 30 days in this month coming, because we're going to have 2 days new moon day. So that will give us 30 days in that month. The next day, Sunday, will be a new moon that begin the 4th month. Okay, so we got 30 days, ends right here. So I'm going to have to go back and then figure out when is the middle of that. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. 15. That is a Friday. 15. Friday. Okay. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. 15. That will be on whatever this is. I'm going to click the next and find out. So it's going to be a Friday. I think it's June 2nd. June 2nd. Okay, let me click and go here. Okay. So yeah, that's June 2nd. So that's when the feast is going to be. The next day is probably going to be the regular Sabbath. The next day will be the regular weekly Sabbath. The feast will be on June 2nd. So that was why I told you, if you remember, I kept saying earlier that you have a 2 days new moon day. When you have a 2 day, oh my goodness, look at all this ad. These people are crazy. So, like as I said, if you have 2 days new moon day, then that feast is going to be the day before the Sabbath. if you have a 1-day new moon day, that feast will fall right into the Sabbath. It will be on a Sabbath day. So the Feast of Weeks is going to be on June 2nd. It's usually in the month of June of the Roman calendar. Usually. I can't even remember seeing it in any other day other than in June. It's usually in June in the man-made calendar. So this time it's going to be in June 2nd. The next day will be the regular Sabbath. Regular weekly Sabbath, the next day. So that the feast will be on in June. The next day will be the regular weekly Sabbath. So it's June 2nd. So all praises to our Heavenly Father. My brothers and sisters, does anybody have any question regarding this? Okay, so now we know that for 2023, in the Roman calendar, the Feast of Weeks is going to be on June 2nd of June. And like the Most High told us, we are not to do any civil work on that day. No buying, no selling on that day. We're supposed to have a holy convocation. We are to have a holy convocation according to Leviticus 23. We're supposed to have a holy convocation. We are to do no civil work. Leviticus 23:21. Leviticus 23:21. And ye shall proclaim on the same day. That is, you shall proclaim on the same day that it is a holy convocation to you. You shall do no customary work. It shall be a statute forever in all your dwellings throughout your generations. Throughout your generations. So that's basically it. For this year in 2023, the feast is going to be in the middle of the third month, which is June 2nd, the 2nd of June, because the middle of the third month will be on the 2nd of June in the man-made calendar. So all praises to our Heavenly Father. I give the Most High all the glory and all the honor. If anybody has any question, anything regarding this feast, please feel free to give me a call. Feel free to call if you have any question regarding this feast. As you can see, or as you saw in Leviticus 23:21, we are not supposed to work on that day. It's to be a holy convocation. We shall do no customary work. So that will be in the middle of the third month. That will be in the 2nd of June, 2023. The next day will be a regular weekly Sabbath. So all praises to our Heavenly Father.
Thank you for your interest in this video. If you have any questions, please feel free to contact us through WhatsApp. You can call us or send us a message. You can also email us at lawstogod@gmail.com. Check out our website at www.lawstogodskingdom.com. Download our mobile app from the Android store. Search for Laws to God app. You can also find us on Facebook. Just search for Laws to God. Don't forget, you can also use Skype to call us. Just download Skype on your phone and search for Laws to God. If you are in South Africa and you need a congregation to worship with, give us a call. For more information that we don't have here on YouTube, please download our app and check out our website, www.lawstogodskingdom.com. Help us spread this truth by sharing this video on your social media.